There are people who don't care how much you've changed. They don't see the nights you picked yourself up from pieces. They don't hear the conversations you've had with yourself in silence. They don't notice the courage it took to walk away from the person you used to be. They only remember what you did wrong. They repeat your past mistakes as if that's all you'll ever be. And they do it not to understand you, but to keep you stuck in the place you've already left behind. Not everyone is happy when you move forward. Sometimes it's the ones who were once close who feel threatened by your growth. Because every step you take toward the light is a silent reminder that they've remained in the dark. But you're not here to make anyone comfortable with the older version of you. You're here to become your best self consciously, with self-command, and without asking for permission. And when someone keeps pulling you back into your past, remember it often says more about them than it does about you. So why do they do it? Let's begin with the first reason. 1. They haven't truly healed. Some wounds no longer bleed but still ache whenever someone walks too close. Just like there are people who seem to have left the past behind, yet still carry it not on their backs, but in their eyes, in their words, in the way they look at you and refuse to accept that you've changed. They bring up the past not to connect, but to pull you back. Because when they see you've changed, they're forced to face a truth they're not ready for, that they haven't. This is something few are willing to say. Your growth might unintentionally touch a pain they've buried. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've done something they haven't dared to face. Look within. When you let go of the old self, change your habits, abandon self-destructive patterns, you've already fought a battle they haven't even begun, and that unsettles them. An old friend once said to me, half joking, half serious, "So now you're a good person, huh?" I smiled lightly, but it didn't feel light at all. Not because it offended me, but because I knew it came from a place of pain, a place where my conscious living became a silent accusation against the way they were still choosing to live. In their eyes, I wasn't someone trying, I was a traitor, someone who left us to chase something higher. And the truth is, not everyone wants others to change, especially when that change makes them feel left behind. Stoic philosophy says, those who are not healed will always judge those who are trying. Not because they're cruel, but because they're hurting, and instead of facing their pain, they take the easier route, turning it outward. They keep you inside an old version of yourself, not because you're stuck, but because they haven't dared to walk the path you've taken. This story is not unfamiliar. I knew a woman named Alina who spent years trapped in toxic relationships and self-harm. After years of therapy and mindfulness, she became strong, calm, and grounded in her worth. But every time she visited her old group of friends, they brought up her drunk nights, her breakdowns, her lowest points. At first, she laughed it off, but eventually she saw it clearly. They didn't remember her. They remembered the version of her that was easy to mock, easy to control, easy to keep small, because who she is now forces them to ask, "What about me?" And in that, you learn a hard truth. Not everyone is attached to you for who you are. Some are only attached because they knew you at your weakest. When you grow, they lose their foothold in your story. And instead of adjusting to grow with you, they try to pull you back. But here lies the difference in a self-possessed mind. You don't need to argue loudly to prove you've changed. Quiet strength is a declaration in itself. Stoicism doesn't teach you to argue. It teaches you to live clearly, rationally, and without apology. You don't need anyone to validate that you've changed. The life you're living is proof enough. So when someone keeps bringing up the past, don't get angry. Understand that they're showing you where they are on their own journey. Maybe they're still stuck. Maybe they haven't yet forgiven themselves. and your forward motion only makes their stillness harder to bear. Compassion doesn't mean letting others drag you backward. Real compassion is understanding why they behave the way they do and still choosing to move forward. Without judgment, without resentment, just without turning back. You've come far enough to know what's worthy of your energy. And living forever inside a version of yourself you've already outgrown is not one of those things. So if someone keeps mentioning who you used to be, smile. Move on gently but firmly. You don't live in that chapter anymore. And you don't need to stay there just because someone else isn't ready to turn the page. Growth is sometimes a lonely journey, but it's the most worthwhile one. And you've already started. Don't let anyone, especially someone from your past, pull you back to a place you left with courage and effort. Hold your inner stillness. It is the highest sign of a free mind. And if they haven't healed yet, let them see themselves reflected in your steadiness. No need to teach, no need to explain, just continue living the truth you fought to earn. Because sometimes your quiet transformation is the loudest reminder of all. 2. They're testing if you've truly changed. Not everyone who brings up your past is trying to attack you. Some do it in subtler ways. They don't blame, don't accuse, don't openly resist. They just drop a harmless-sounding comment, a teasing remark, a subtle nudge, a glance that lands too precisely on an old wound and wait to see how you react. And that's when you realize they don't care about the truth. They're just testing if your change is real or just an act. You'll see it when people start pressing old buttons. The triggers that once made you lose your temper, become defensive, spiral into shame. They're not looking for answers. They're looking for cracks. Because if they can get you to respond the old way, they can convince themselves you haven't really changed, that your growth is just surface level. And that comforts them because if you haven't truly changed, they don't have to either. I once sat in a reunion with old college friends. One of them turned to me and smirked. "Still got that temper? Remember when you slammed the door in class?" Everyone laughed. I smiled too, calmly. But inside I understood that wasn't an innocent question. It was a test. They wanted to see if I'd feel ashamed, if I'd react, if I'd lose composure. Because if I did, they could rest easy knowing I was still that same angry guy. But if I stayed grounded, they'd have to confront a truth they might not be ready for, that I've changed. And I didn't need their approval to do it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "True strength lies not in the reaction, but in the restraint." It's a quiet power, unimposing, yet deeply unsettling to those who once knew how to shake you. When you're no longer moved by what once unsettled you, you're not just free, you've become ungovernable to them. Silence, when chosen, is not weakness. It's the clearest proof that you are no longer that old self, no longer led by a wounded ego, no longer trapped in old reflexes. You've learned to sit still before the things that once made you erupt. Not out of fear, but because you now know not everything deserves your energy. The real test isn't whether your past is brought up. It's how you respond when it is. When someone digs up the old you, they're not inviting a conversation, they're checking to see if you'll slip back into who you once were. They're hunting for weakness, and if you stay steady, they'll feel unsettled, because you're not playing their game anymore. A friend once told me, "I just want to make sure you haven't forgotten who you were." I replied, "I haven't forgotten, I just don't live there anymore." That wasn't a harsh refusal. It was a boundary, gentle but firm. Sometimes these tests come from people closest to us, a father, a sister, a partner. They don't mean to hurt you. They just want to know that if you react the same way, then your change isn't a threat to your bond. Because growth often shifts dynamics, shifts energies, and not everyone's ready for that shift. Epictetus taught, "No one can make you react unless you give them permission." That's the deepest lesson of inner freedom. When you no longer react on impulse, you truly own yourself. No longer a prisoner of past emotions, no longer a puppet of old defenses. You become the captain of your own ship, and that truth, whether others believe it or not, needs no defense. If someone is testing you, don't be angry, just observe. If they prod to see if you still hurt, show them you no longer live in that pain, not by striking back, but by smiling, staying calm, and not letting them move you. Because someone who has truly changed doesn't need to shout it. They remain unshaken in silence. And eventually, those who keep testing stop. Not because they accept you, but because they no longer affect you. And that is the deepest form of freedom. 3. They don't truly respect the journey you've taken. There is a quiet pain, deeper than open criticism. It's when you've walked through storms, stitched your life back together alone, rebuilt yourself from ruin, and then someone looks at you and says, half joking, half serious, "I still remember when you were a complete mess." They don't see anything remarkable in the fact that you're still standing. They don't grasp the weight of each step you took. They only remember that you once fell and use that to define you. Disrespect doesn't always come in the form of insults. It shows in how they talk about you as if you were some lucky accident, as if your growth was an anomaly, as if your self-mastery was something that wasn't supposed to happen. They look at you and say, "Can't believe you actually pulled it off." But behind that isn't admiration, it's doubt. It's a way of shrinking your journey into a casual anecdote stripped of the blood and tears you lived through. I once met a woman at a seminar. She had struggled with severe drug addiction for 7 years. She never hid her past, but she didn't live in it either. She got clean, started from scratch, graduated college in her 30s, and now works as a counselor for youth rehab programs. Yet every time she returns to her hometown, her aunt says the same line, "You look okay now, but I still remember you with that wild hair, disappearing for weeks." That seemingly harmless comment locks her back inside a memory she fought her way out of with her own blood and tears. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't judge a person by what they've been through. Judge them by how they walk forward." But not everyone has the depth to do that. Many people can't respect your journey because they've never had to walk one of their own. They look at your result and call it luck. They see who you are now and forget that you once fell, once flailed, once nearly vanished. And perhaps what hurts most is not that they don't understand. It's that they don't even try. They don't ask how you got back up. They don't ask what kept you alive. They're not curious about the long nights you cried alone, whispering, "Just try again tomorrow." They don't see a survivor. They see someone who once had issues. That is denial disguised as pride. Some people can't respect your journey because it forces them to question their own. If you, someone who once broke, could stand up and change, then what's stopping them from moving? If you've done the impossible, then what excuse do they have for never starting? And so, they dismiss your effort. Not because it lacks value, but because it reflects their shame. Epictetus once said, "We don't need the approval of outsiders when our own footsteps prove the path." It's a necessary reminder you don't need others to understand the depth of what you've survived. Those who haven't walked that path won't fully feel it, and that's okay. They have the right not to understand, but they don't have the right to diminish what you've lived. So when someone looks at you with doubt or downplays your effort, you don't need to argue. Just remember one thing. You were there in the storm, in the abyss, in the nights with no way out, and you walked through it. No one can take that from you. No look, no word, no rejection can erase that truth. Respect isn't found in polite compliments. It's in how someone sees you, whether they honor your lived journey or trap you in the image that's easiest for them to accept. And if they can't move past that image, they don't deserve to walk beside you. Not because you look down on them, but because you've learned to value yourself. Don't let anyone keep you in an old chapter just because they're too afraid to read on. You are no longer that person. You've gone further, and you deserve to be seen not with pity, but with real respect. 4. They keep you stuck because they don't want you to rise. Not everyone holds you back out of malice. Some do it out of fear of losing their place. Because when you step out of the old pattern, when you stop reacting like before, when you're no longer easy to wound, manipulate, or pacify, they lose the power they once had in the relationship. You change, and with it, the soft control they used to rely on begins to vanish. So they don't need to attack you outright. All they need is to remind you of your past mistakes, just enough to pull you back in mentally until you begin to wonder, do I really deserve the person I'm becoming? It's a quiet form of manipulation, no shouting, no open blame. It usually shows up in the most familiar conversations, in texts that sound caring, in a smirk that says, "Don't forget who you used to be." But you see clearly what lies beneath not concern. A message: you're not allowed to outgrow us. There was a man I knew named Ethan. He had a chaotic youth video game addiction, debt, a sense of aimlessness. But then he made a choice to change. Step by step. He quit his destructive habits, took up meditation, learned to master his emotions, and eventually became a certified life coach. He never hid his past, but he no longer lived in it. Still, at every family gathering, his cousin would begin with, "Can't believe you're coaching people now." Everyone would laugh. Ethan stayed quiet, but inside he knew they didn't care how he changed. They just needed to be sure. He still remembered his old role, because if Ethan truly rose, then the person who once felt superior, the one who could judge, would lose that status. And not everyone has the courage to watch someone else rise without feeling themselves shrink. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once wrote, "Some chains are not made of iron, but of guilt placed upon us by others." That's how some people keep you bound. They don't lock you in. They make you lock yourself in with self-doubt, with guilt, with the sense that you've moved on too fast, changed too much, or left the past behind too easily. But here's what you need to remember. Growth is not betrayal. Becoming your next version isn't a declaration that your past self was shameful. It simply means it's time. And if someone feels discomfort with that, that's their work, not yours. Truth is, those who try to keep you stuck often aren't even aware of what they're doing. They're not necessarily malicious. They just fear you'll go so far, they won't be able to reach you anymore. So they do the only thing they know, pull you back, repeat old stories, keep you at a frequency they're still comfortable with. But a mature mind realizes, loyalty to others should never outweigh honesty to yourself. You cannot shrink to fit a version of yourself that others are more comfortable with. You cannot live small just so someone can feel safe thinking they still know who you are. If someone truly loves you, they will learn to love the path you're on, even if it looks different than theirs. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't live to make others comfortable. Live in a way that feels true." And living true sometimes means accepting that some people will no longer understand you. When you feel someone pulling you back, ask yourself, is it them holding me, or my own need to be accepted? If you've been kind, patient, and forgiving, Yet they still only see you as the shadow of who you were. Maybe they don't want you to rise. Not because they hate you, but because they haven't yet risen above themselves. And eventually, you'll understand. Their attempts to keep you small no longer make you angry. They just make you sad. Sad that they can't see who you're becoming. But you don't need their vision to keep going, because the light you're walking toward doesn't need proof. It just needs you to have the courage not to turn back. Keep walking, keep growing, keep rising, and let those who can't keep up fall behind. Not in bitterness, but in gratitude, because their rejection reminded you that you're never going back. You're not here to make others feel safe. You're here to walk fully in the self you've chosen to become, and that is freedom. 5. Your growth makes them feel insecure. Personal growth is something everyone praises until you're the one growing. When you begin changing in the smallest ways, like choosing silence over provocation, walking away from toxic relationships, or spending your mornings in meditation instead of complaint, the atmosphere around you begins to shift as well. And strangely, not everyone smiles at your transformation. Some people grow distant, others mock you in quiet ways. Then you realize it's not because you've done something wrong, but because your rise unsettles them. Insecurity isn't something people admit easily. It creeps quietly into familiar relationships. You don't have to brag. Just living more intentionally, choosing more responsibly, and reacting with self-control becomes a silent reminder that someone else is standing still. An old friend once said to me, half joking, "You're way too positive these days." Kind of fake, honestly. I didn't reply. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I understood what bothered him wasn't me. It was the discomfort of being compared. No one likes to feel left behind. And when you move forward, even unintentionally, you highlight that distance. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If your growth makes others uncomfortable, it is not your fault. It is a warning within their own minds." When someone sees you evolving, they're forced to examine themselves. And if they're not ready to face what they've avoided, they'll choose the easier path, devaluing your growth. They might say you've changed, for the worse, that you're no longer fun, that you've become too rigid, that you're pretending to be virtuous. But don't be fooled. Those words don't reflect you. They reflect how they feel standing next to someone who dared to do what they only contemplate in silence, stepping out of the comfort zone. I remember a cousin I was once close to. When I started exercising regularly, eating cleaner, and saying no to complaint-filled hangouts, she told me, "You live like a robot now. Doesn't seem joyful at all." At first, I questioned myself, was I being too extreme? But then I saw it clearly by letting go of old habits. I had forced her to question why she still clung to them, and she wasn't ready to do that. If your growth goes far enough, it doesn't just change you, it disrupts the fragile balance in unhealthy relationships. Those relationships were built on your old role, the one who needed help, the one who always gave in, the one who was easy to hurt. When you're no longer that person, their role loses purpose. And many won't know how to treat your new self. Instead of adjusting, they'll take the easier path, trying to pull you back. That's the moment when you need the most clarity. You must ask yourself, do I preserve the comfort of the relationship or the honesty of who I've become? You can't keep both if the other person refuses to grow with you. Epictetus once said, "We cannot live fully if we must shrink to fit someone else's image of us." You don't need to make yourself smaller so others feel bigger. You don't have to stop growing just to avoid making someone feel guilty. And you certainly don't need to apologize for choosing a path with purpose. If your growth makes someone uneasy, You don't need to explain. You only need to keep living your truth. Because if they truly care, they'll find a way to meet the person you're becoming. They'll learn to walk with you or step aside without trying to tear your journey down. Growth is a lonely road, especially when you no longer resemble anyone who used to know you. But that's also when you begin to attract those unafraid of change, those who are also evolving, also rising, and who don't feel threatened when others become better. These are the ones to keep. The rest, let them go not in resentment, but in silent respect for a journey they're not yet ready to begin. You're not growing to be above anyone. You're growing so you no longer have to live as a version of yourself that kept hurting. And if someone doesn't understand that, let them find the answer on their own when they're ready to face themselves. 6. They use your past to keep you under control. There's a common form of manipulation that few recognize. It's when someone constantly reminds you of your past mistakes, not to help you grow, but to make you feel small. They don't chain you to the past with iron, but with words. No shouting, no threats. Just one sentence, delivered at the right time with a look, with a half smile and the phrase, "Did you forget who you used to be?" And suddenly, you hesitate, even if only inside. That's how people control you with guilt. An invisible debt, never written down, but one you keep repaying daily with hesitation, self-suppression, and apologies for things you never did wrong. They bring up the times you lost control, emphasize your past failures, and replay the mistakes you've already deeply regretted, not because they care about redemption, but because they know that if they can keep you ashamed long enough, you'll quietly stay in the role of the one who messed up. I remember an old classmate named Neil. After graduation, he was unemployed for over a year and relied on family support. But then he decided to change. Learned a trade, supported himself, and eventually opened a small but steady computer repair shop. He lived responsibly, depended on no one. Yet every time he met the cousin who once helped him, Neil always heard the same dagger. "If it weren't for me, you'd be out on the street right now." Even though he'd changed, Neil was still being forced to wear the label of the one who owed. And that overshadowed all he'd built through sweat and solitude. Epictetus once said, "If you let others own your past, they'll set the price of your present." When someone brings up your past not to help you grow, but to make you doubt your worth today, it's not a reminder, it's a weapon. They want you to believe you're still unworthy of trust, still stained, still undeserving of walking tall. Manipulating through the past is a way to keep you constantly proving yourself. Proving that you've changed, that you're better now, that you've learned to be good. And that's the trap. When you're always proving, you can't be free. Your life becomes an endless performance, and your audience never truly wants to believe in your redemption. You must realize this. You don't need anyone's permission to live as a new person. You don't owe them eternal apologies. You are not responsible for carrying someone else's doubt simply because they refuse to believe in transformation. You've changed, and if they can't see it, it's because they've chosen to look at you through the lens of fear, envy, or their need for control. Instead of resisting or defending, do what the mature do. Stay silent. Keep living your values and protect your peace. Because peace is the one thing they can't control unless you give it to them. You've already survived the worst version of yourself. Now is the time to live the rest, not needing permission, not needing to prove, and most of all, not letting yourself be dragged backward by those who refuse to release the old you. Let them hold on to the past if they must. As for you, your future is waiting. 7. They don't accept who you are today. Not everyone hates you. Some people just don't know how to relate to you now that you're no longer the person they used to know. When you change, It's not just your clothing, lifestyle, or mindset. You begin to behave differently, draw clearer boundaries, stop tolerating teasing, and no longer nod just to keep the peace. And that difference makes some people uncomfortable. They don't attack you. They don't openly criticize you. They just pretend you haven't changed at all. They still talk to you like you've never grown. They still call you by nicknames tied to your old insecurities. They keep repeating stories you no longer wish to hear. They laugh when recalling the time you cried, the time you failed, the time you lost control as if it's some light-hearted memory, even though you know it was a wound you struggled to heal. And the most painful part is this: they don't do it to hurt you. They do it because they can't accept that you've outgrown the image they've long held of you. I once heard an old friend say casually, "You sound different these days, like you're preaching or something." No malice, just a subtle way of saying, "I don't like who you're becoming." Because if you've truly changed, then they must change the way they treat you. They'll have to relearn how to understand you, how to listen, how to respond. And many people don't want to do that. They choose the easier path, keeping you in the old role, the role they're used to, the role that makes you easier to control. Epictetus once said, "You are not bound to old roles if you have the reason to step off the stage." Which means you don't have to keep playing the part of the angry one, the weak one, the one who always needs help, just because someone still expects that from you. You're not responsible for meeting the lazy expectations of those who hope you'll never change, just so they never have to. Your change makes them uncomfortable, not because you did something wrong, but because it disrupts the familiar framework they rely on. When you mature, they must begin treating you like an adult. No more careless teasing, no more unsolicited advice from above, no more crossing boundaries under the excuse of closeness. And if they're not flexible enough to adapt, they'll choose denial. They'll keep treating you the same, speaking to you the same, hoping it will make you doubt your own change. A woman once told me that after she left a toxic relationship and began rebuilding her self-worth, her old friends stopped supporting her. They said she was pretending to be strong, overreacting. It wasn't that bad before. But the truth was, before, she had endured too much, stayed silent too long, and now she no longer wanted to live that way, and that her firmness, her clarity and boundaries made them uneasy because the person they once knew no longer existed, and they weren't ready to meet this new one. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "A changed soul is evidence that reason is blooming." You don't need anyone to understand your transformation for it to be real. You just need to live it, honor it, and stop wearing old clothes just to fit old expectations. If someone cannot accept who you are today, let them remain in the past. Not because you look down on them, but because you've learned to value yourself. They're free to remember who you once were, but you have the right to live as who you're becoming, and no one has the right to interfere with that. Not with words, not with memories, and certainly not with affection disguised as nostalgia. I believe what exhausts us isn't that others bring up the past. It's the constant pressure to explain that we're no longer that person. We hope that if we live kindly enough, clearly enough, and steadily enough, someday they'll see it for themselves. But sometimes that day never comes. Because some people don't want to see that you've changed, because if you truly have, they must admit they were wrong to keep you frozen in the past. And I understand that feeling. The feeling of standing in front of someone you were once close to, but now their eyes hold doubt, sarcasm, and a desperate grip on what used to be. You want them to see the new you, but then you realize not everyone is ready to update your version in their mind. So, in the end, you choose silence. Not because you're weak, but because you now know those who truly see you won't need reminders. And for those who refuse to see, explaining only deepens the void. If this message resonates with you, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss future content. Keep calm in your heart, hold truth in your gaze, and keep walking as if you know, deep down, that you deserve to become exactly who you're meant to be. See you in the next video.